We'll continue to follow the latest stories for you. If you're just joining us, good to have you with us. You're watching on your television, computer, tablet or mobile France 24, or you could also be listening to us on your radio, on Radio France International as well. I'm Stuart Norval, and with me here on set as well is Philip Turle of RFI, Radio France International, also a variety of guests that I'll introduce to you in just a moment's time. But first of all, Philip, we've just been bringing that news that pretty much Donald Trump is on his way to the White House. I mean, we still don't know for sure. We've still got those key states to come. But, I mean, all-round shock, really, from people who weren't quite expecting this, were they? I mean, it was close, but people thought it would be Hillary Clinton in the end.
Well, I think the first thing that jumps to mind is there's going to be a lot of questions asked afterwards about how on earth did this happen and why did no one see it coming? Even as far as we've got now, with the fact that Donald Trump is like 25 votes away from the 270 that he needs to become president of the United States, or thereabouts. How come it's got that close when all the opinion polls last night were saying Hillary Clinton had still quite a comfortable advance over Donald Trump? So the first thing is, A, if Donald Trump gets into the White House, I think that's going to put paid to the polling industry big time. I mean, they're going to be virtually dead. Having failed to predict the Brexit vote in June, they became a laughingstock. Now, if they failed to predict the victory of Donald Trump in the United States, this is extremely bad news for the polling industry. And the second thing is, how come they didn't manage to predict it? What went wrong? Why were people not telling the truth? Was it because people didn't want to admit that they were going to vote for Donald Trump? Was it because they didn't know who they were going to vote for? Was it because there was so much hatred as far as Hillary Clinton is concerned that they didn't trust her, that finally at the last minute they decided to vote for Donald Trump? All these questions that for the moment, it's too early, and Donald Trump hasn't won yet. It looks like he may well do, but these questions are without answers. But the whole earthquake, the whole tremor that's been caused by this, I think is going to have shockwaves which are going to last for weeks, if not months or years afterwards.
I mean, while you're talking there, Philip, just bring up the map, can we, of the latest position that we're seeing right across the US. There we go. We've still got those states in white there, which are still to declare, but you can see how many of them are red, and really relatively how few of them have changed hands, if you like. And those key ones as well of Florida and Ohio that everybody was watching remained with Trump, and with not sizable majorities, but with, it wasn't right down to the wire, was it?
No, but I think everybody thought that Florida was going to fall into the hands of Hillary Clinton. And everybody else said, well, if Ohio falls into the hands of Hillary Clinton, then it's going to be the state that will that will mean that she will become president of the United States, because Ohio since 1960 has always been won by the person who then goes on to win the election. So if Donald Trump wins Ohio, which has been the case, it looks like that's almost a ticket for him to get to the White House. So it means it's even more difficult for Hillary Clinton to claw back those final votes. And, we're in this reverse situation, whereas last night people were saying it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump. He's going to have to win all these states at the end to actually manage to get the final tally, but it's going to be very difficult for him. Well, now it's Hillary Clinton who's in that position, and Donald Trump appears to be where Hillary Clinton was expected to be today.
OK, Philip, stay with us. We'll be talking to Philip and my other guests a lot more, of course, in the next hour here on France 24. Perhaps, as Philip was saying, the most watched state in the whole election all the way through has been Florida, perhaps thought of as the key swing state. Let's hear from a few voters there.
I voted for Hillary Clinton. We need to keep, Democrats in office. Obviously, we don't have the best choices this election, but at least one with experience is what we need in this country, not one that has a lot of, discrimination in his mind and doesn't know really how to answer questions and just runs around and just says a lot of negative things. So we don't need that.
Americans are tired of seeing them hard-working money given to people that do not deserve it. My insurance premium just went up. It's going to go up again in January. Somebody else is getting it for free.
To me, I'm actually quite disappointed in the two candidates. I'm going in there now and I still don't know who I'm going to pick.
I'm just tired of all the mudslinging, basically. So I'm very relieved that it's over.
Some voters there then talking in Florida. We're going to cross live now to Miami. Sarabi Tandon is our correspondent joining us now from the University of Florida. She's actually been at a Republican watch party. I can imagine, Sarabi, that people have been rather celebrating there.
Yeah, it's definitely been a very long and unexpected night, but of course the mood here has only gotten better and better. At this moment, they're all sitting on the edge of their seats waiting for the results of Michigan to come in. But through the night, we've seen them celebrate each time a state has been called for Trump. The highlight, of course, being Florida. When Florida was announced for Donald Trump, that's when everyone here became extremely ecstatic. You know, that moment meant to them that their support for Donald Trump, them going out to vote for him, them rallying for him, had paid off. He was now 29 seats closer to the White House. Of course, we've been speaking to the people here about why they voted for Donald Trump, and it's not that a lot of them say that they voted for him definitively because of some belief in his leadership skills or his personality cut, but rather that he is such a newcomer, that he's so unconnected to the political elite of Washington, and that he promises to wipe out corruption from the White House. And those are the sort of promises that also lured them to vote for Trump.
And Sarabi, there was a lot of talk before the election and indeed on polling day that the Latin vote was crucial there in Florida. But in the end, it doesn't seem to have made any difference, does it?
Yeah, I think that's been the real surprise of this evening because exactly like you said, we've been talking about the Latin vote in Florida. We've been saying that they've come out in unprecedented numbers, and in all the polls it showed that they supported the Democrat Party, and they were, I think the Democrats and people watching from outside were really expecting the Latin community to swing this vote. Now, obviously that hasn't happened, so the question is, why not? A look at Florida's electoral, a breakup of Florida's electoral votes actually perhaps gives us this answer. Now, there are about 13 million registered voters in Florida. 4.2 are Republicans, 4.6 are Democrats. So they're neck to neck in any case. And then the pressure comes down on the independent voters. And it looks like this time the independent voters went out and voted for Donald Trump. And that's really why he might have been able to swing the election in Florida in his favor by 2 percentage points. That's a lot higher than what Obama won Florida with in 2012, which was under 1 percentage point.
Sarabi, thanks very much. Sarabi Tandon, our correspondent there, speaking to us live from Miami. Well, let's talk to our guests. You've seen them sitting with me here on set, but with me here is David Adelman. He's a columnist for USA Today. He's also been following the elections throughout for us here on France 24. Good to have you with us once again, David. And also Frederick Douzet. She's a professor. She's from the Institut Français, the French Institute, of course. She's an American civilization expert at Paris-Wheat University and a member of the Institut des Amériques. Thanks very much for both of you for being with us. Let's start with you, David. I mean, it does look at this stage, doesn't it, as if we are going to see a Donald Trump presidency.
I think we are, and I'd like to pick up on something that my colleague from RFI said, which was very right, but and take it one step further. I think what was really missed throughout all of this entire process, and that what really led to what seems likely to be a Donald Trump presidency, is the fact that there's a vast mass of people out there in America that nobody has ever polled, that nobody understands, that who is not really part of the establishment, certainly, but even of the fabric of America as we traditionally have known it. And these people have now come out and they have said, excuse me, but this is our country too, and we want to take it back. And you, Donald Trump, will be our vehicle for taking it back. And I think that's the key thing to understand is these people who Donald Trump is appealing to that we never see. They're in the flyover country. From when we get on a plane and fly from New York to L.A., they're down there. And they're in towns, small towns and villages and cities and parts of cities that we never talk to, that we never penetrate. The pollsters never reach, certainly, very clearly. And that's what's going to happen now is these people have come out and they have said, we're going to take back our country, our America, and you, Donald Trump, are our voice.
And do you think there should be some people who might be, or should be, perhaps very worried about that? I mean, I heard some comments earlier on from people who were actually in a bar in Manhattan, in a Republican bar, hearing some quite nasty chants about ethnic minorities, for example, and other people who are obviously also in the US. I mean, do you think they should be concerned at this stage?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, these people are now feeling empowered, newly empowered, and these are people who are really the people who have arsenals in their closets. I know some of them. We have a small country place out in Pennsylvania, in the heart of redneck country, out in the woods, and we know people out there who are like that. They really do believe that that they need to defend themselves and all that they stand for, no matter what. And now they've been given a license, in effect, to do that, and to go out there and express themselves more openly than they've ever felt the right to do before. And this is perhaps the single most, in my view, the most frightening aspect of this whole evening.
Frederick, does it frighten you, that?
Yeah, well, I think you're right. It's quite worrying because there's been so much hatred released during this campaign, and particularly targeted towards minorities, that it might unleash and allow people to voice quite overtly their racism and their prejudice against minorities. So that definitely cannot be good in a country where 92% of the population growth over the last decade is minorities, and when 1 out of 4 kids is Latino. So I think it's quite frightening to that extent.
OK, we'll be back with both of you in a moment. We're just hearing, in fact, that the Republicans have officially conserved control of the Senate in the US. That's being called by the US media at the moment, the Republicans conserving overall control of the Senate. We also have another guest who's joining us as well, who we can speak to. We can speak to John Aravosis. He's a Democratic political consultant, a journalist and civil rights advocate and blogger as well. Thanks very much for joining us there from New York. I had a little look at your Twitter feed earlier on. I have to be honest, John, you're obviously not a very happy man tonight.
Yeah, I think I represent a large portion of my country that isn't exactly very thrilled at the moment. You know, it's not over yet, but it's not looking good.
And what do you think that means for the US?
You know, I don't know that we know. It's difficult to sort of even imagine. I mean, this is a worst case scenario that I think nobody even thought possible, not just because the polls were doing so well for Hillary, but because, as I think I heard your previous guest talking about, Trump is so uniquely bad as an American president. Culturally, I think he brings things to the office that are just abysmal in terms of personal behavior. It's not just his positions, it's what he represents. I think he puts at risk our entire moral authority in the world that already many people have questioned, you know, because of Iraq and other foreign ventures, but also, as as one of your guests talked about, you know, it's not just civil rights. I mean, I'm very much worried about civil rights, whether it's African Americans, whether it's Muslims, whether it's Latinos, whether it's the LGBT community. But I was talking to a friend this evening. We work for ourselves. We're worried about what's going to happen to our healthcare. You know, American healthcare system is very complicated, but the bottom line is, if you lose a job and you work on your own, or if you move to another state, you lose your healthcare and you have to get it all over again. If we get rid of Obamacare, health insurance companies can once again turn us down for having allergies. If you have an allergy, an insurance company can say, we're not going to take you. That can happen again if we lose Obamacare. You know, we're talking about the implications with Russia right now. Not only did Russia try to influence our election, but we've got a presidential candidate that seems rather cozy with Vladimir Putin, to the point where he talked about, you know, maybe it would be okay if Putin invaded Europe. It might not be too big a deal if you guys don't pay your bills. In my lifetime, I can't imagine any presidential candidate talking like that. So it's a worst case scenario that I think most of us hadn't even imagined was possible.
But John, just listening to what David Andelman was just saying, I mean, as he talked about those vast swathes of people in the Central America, I mean, they obviously would have a very different view to you. It's their moment now, isn't it?
Oh, it very much is their moment. I think the question for me is, to some degree, what moment they were all looking for. You know, I think absolutely the country did rally around Trump's sort of demagogic views. For some reason, the racism, the anti-Semitism, the xenophobia did resonate with a large portion of the country, and that scares me. You know, as an American, that those are Trump's final ad he did on TV was basically an anti-Semitic ad about global world financial powers trying to take over our country. And everybody talked about it. Everybody knew he meant Jews. That's not the kind of thing you talk about in this country. It's not the kind of thing a presidential candidate does. So that's part of what scares me, is this isn't just a simple situation where it's Democrat versus Republican. And, you know, we didn't think George Bush was qualified and he got the election and we were pretty freaked out. This goes beyond not being qualified. We believe this man is actually dangerous. And yes, I think half the country is thrilled about it, and that kind of scares me as well.
OK, John, thanks very much. John Aravosis joining us there from New York. I mean, John there saying he's dangerous. I mean, would you two agree with that?
Well, here's a situation, and I'd like to help some of our viewers feel a little bit more at ease, shall we say, with the situation. This was something that the former president of Latvia actually told me about 2 weeks ago when I was visiting this country. He said, because I raised this whole question of what if Trump becomes the president? And he said, he said, I like to think that the American system and the American way of life is larger than any one individual, and that you can withstand that, and that we, the world, can withstand it. And I'm hoping that that's what will happen, that there is an enormous bureaucracy there. There's an enormous military might, and a power and a power and glory, if you will, of the United States and our democracy that I think somehow will get us through this period. And after all, in 2 years, we have the option to elect a House and a Senate that is of the opposite party. And this has happened before. When Bill Clinton came in 1992, in 1994, Newt Gingrich came in with his Contract for America, swept Republicans in. They swept both houses of Congress. 4 years later, they were all gone. So, these things do have a cycle.
Frederick, this time around, though, he's got the Senate and the House of Representatives behind him, at least for 2 years, as David said there.
Yes, but I think you need to consider that, the electorate that voted for Trump, it's not just the people from the rural communities with no college degree. Obviously, white-educated Republican males came home, and even white women, educated women came home. So I think a lot of people who have supported him, even though they were reluctant to pronounce his name, have just made the bet that exercising power is different from running a campaign. So he might become more reasonable or rely more on his advisors, or he might do something completely outrageous and get impeached, or he might just be the puppet of his vice president, Mike Pence. So I think the bet was that it was still better than having Hillary Clinton because there was a lot of stake. Tax cuts, nomination at the Supreme Court that can have a very long-lasting impact on U.S. politics, and probably also because we saw from the polls, although can we trust the polls, but obviously a lot of people changed their minds in the week before the election, that maybe the FBI revelations had a huge impact on the swing voters.
Yeah.
So,
even though the FBI just a couple of days ago said there's nothing to worry about.
Well, that was the day before the election, so I think it sort of fed the doubts that were pre-existing. And I think, the country is just really strongly polarized, so we knew that it was going to be close anyway. And the question was whether the Republicans who dislike Trump were still going to vote for him or not. And that's what we found out.
And we mustn't forget as well that an enormous number of people really can't stand Hillary Clinton either. I mean, obviously we've heard a lot of people saying they don't like Donald Trump, particularly after the tape that came out a couple of weeks ago when he was overheard talking about women. But a lot of hate towards Hillary Clinton as well.
And question about her judgment as well. The tapes were only a part of it. I think there was a whole question of what kind of judgment did she have in terms of the foundation, the Clinton Foundation, and all that she represented in terms of self-dealing and so on. I think there was a great fear that once you put her in power, there'd be no stopping her excesses and so on. So I think that she was, in effect, her worst enemy, her own worst enemy, and helped defeat herself.
She had, sorry.
Go ahead.
She had high negatives to start with, like 60%. And if you look at the enthusiasm gap, about 33% of the voters before the election, if we can trust the polls, were enthusiastic about voting for her, against 46% for Donald Trump. So clearly, it was a choice by default, because she really was negatively perceived by a lot of voters.
Was it a vote, I was just going to say, was it a vote in favour of Donald Trump, or was it a vote against Hillary Clinton? Was it people voting, they didn't particularly want to vote for Trump, but they couldn't force themselves to vote for Hillary Clinton, and so it had to be a vote for Donald Trump, even if they weren't particularly in favour of what he was going to do? It's just too much of a traumatic experience to vote for someone they didn't trust and who, for them, wasn't the candidate they wanted.
And we're going to have to look at turnout data because enthusiasm has a huge impact on turnout. And the thing that is very surprising, if you look at the ground game and how much money she had and how much campaign offices she had opened and how much star power she had to get people out to vote.
Those celebrities we saw in the last
it will
few
be
days.
very interesting to look at the turnout data and find out.
OK, we'll be back with you in just a second. Just for people who are just joining us, because we're just coming up to the past here on France 24 and Radio France International as well. You're watching a special election programme here on France 24 on your television, computer, tablet or mobile. And we're also live on RFI, Radio France International. And today, if we can bring up the map and have a look at the state of play, as it were, right across the US, that is it at the moment. You can see there those key states of Ohio and Florida, for example, going the way of Trump. And we still have those white states, 7 of them still, which are still officially to declare, which is almost unprecedented. It's 1:30 in the morning on the East Coast now in the US. So it's incredible that we still don't have a full set of results, really, yet alone hearing from the candidates themselves once, of course, the main election has been declared. We can also have a look as well at the Electoral College votes. There you go, that's as it stands at the moment. Hillary Clinton on 215, Donald Trump on 244. So you can see just how close it is. But it does appear, the projections at the moment certainly saying that Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the US. So I'm just seeing popping up on the wires on my computer in front of me, a senior member of Angela Merkel's Conservative Party saying we have no idea what Trump would do as US president. It's a very uncertain situation geopolitically. I'm going to put that to Philip Tell, who's on set with me from RFI. I mean, it raises an awful lot of questions about what's going to happen in the world now, where we're going to go with foreign policy, particularly some of the comments he's made, for example, about Mexico and, you know, all sorts of other places around the world to a certain extent.
Everything that was underway that people had worked towards appears to sort of be against what Donald Trump wants. We've got the wall between that he's threatening to build between the United States and Mexico. Will he be able to do it, and will Mexico be willing to pay for it? That's going to be very difficult to work out. We've got Donald Trump against global warming, saying that it was a plot by the Chinese to thwart American industry, and he doesn't believe a word of it, and he's going to go back and start using the coal industry in the United States, which is why we saw this tweet earlier on from somebody in Florida saying, thank you very much, Florida, for voting for someone who's in favour of global warming until the hurricane season comes. On the European front, he's in favour of closer relations with Russia and a more pally relationship with Vladimir Putin. Where does that leave the situation concerning the war in Syria? Will there be, as some are calling it, for a no-fly zone over Syria? And if Russia flies over that, will they shoot a Russian plane down? Probably not. Where will that leave relations between Europe and the United States? These are all questions that all of a sudden remain without answers, whereas if Hillary Clinton were elected to the White House, we would probably see the continuity of the situation that was under Barack Obama, which will be continued under Hillary Clinton, with thoughts that Hillary Clinton might be a little bit more interventionist than Barack Obama might have been. And the other thing, of course, which is quite worrying is that Donald Trump has threatened to tear up the Iranian nuclear agreement. Barack Obama says the United States hasn't been good enough to Israel, and therefore there should be no nuclear agreement with Iran. But if he does tear up that nuclear agreement, that's going to open the door to Iran to do what it wants afterwards. So we don't know how this is going to pan out. We don't know whether this is hopefully just electoral banter before you get elected, and once you're elected you can't do what you said you were going to do before the election because it's impossible, and that happens quite often with many candidates. How far will it be how far will it go as far as Donald Trump is concerned?
But how does he walk that back? I mean, how does he walk back all of his statements? How does he walk back the wall, the nuclear agreement he's tearing up?
Well, it's going to be hard because now he has overall power in the House of Representatives and in the Senate.
No, I'm talking about with the people who voted for him.
Exactly, but he can't even blame anybody for saying, well, I can't do it because they won't let me, because everyone's going to say, well, if you want to do it, fine, go ahead and do it. Yeah. So it's going to be very difficult.
And just a couple of things which I've just pulled out. We just heard from Marine Le Pen, in fact, has apparently congratulated Donald Trump, French far-right leader. And on the reverse of that, just seeing a tweet from the French ambassador to the US, saying after Brexit and this election, anything is now possible. A world is crumbling before our eyes.
Well, I'm not sure how relations are between Marine Le Pen and Donald Trump. There seems to be a bit of friction in there. Marine Le Pen has said that she hasn't got any similarities with Donald Trump. But as we are now heading towards an election here in France, which will take place in April and May next year, already Marine Le Pen is given as being the candidate who's probably going to come first in the first round of that election. And the two top candidates in the first round go through to the second round. So it'll be Marine Le Pen opposite either maybe Nicolas Sarkozy, Alain Juppé from the right, or maybe François Hollande, the outgoing president, on the left. But the far right making inroads in France. And then we see, of course, the result of the Brexit vote in the United Kingdom. So this populism, this rejection of the establishment of the political system as we've known it for the last 60, 70 years is taking root far quicker, I think, than many people would have thought.
OK, we've had a lot of democratic reaction. Let's try and turn the table, shall we? We're going to go to Birmingham in the US, speak to Sean M. McCutcheon. He's a Trump delegate, in fact, from Alabama. I was looking at the figures just before we came on set. Over 60% where you are voted for Trump in Alabama. Presumably you're celebrating now.
Yes, sir. I just got back from the Alabama GOP headquarters, and it's looking real good for Trump. He hasn't quite won it yet, but and we're also doing real well in the local elections here in Alabama.
We've been talking about some of the more controversial things that Donald Trump said during the election campaign on the programme. I mean, do you think that he will follow through with some of those things he said? For example, just picking one of them, building that wall between the US and Mexico.
Oh, absolutely. I think he has to build that wall. I think his whole candidacy and, he certainly doesn't want to upset this wonderful constituency that's brought him here. So, yes, sir, I think he wants to build it. And we want him to.
To be a president of a country like the US, though, shouldn't he be reaching his hand out to people rather than building walls?
Well, he is reaching his hand out. That's the other thing that's been misinterpreted. Certainly we're going to have immigration and we're going to have great relationships with Mexico, but it's like building a fence between you and your neighbor or having a wall between you and your neighbor. I'm sure you love them, but you don't just let them walk in anytime they want.
It doesn't really show much love, though, does it, if you build a wall between two countries?
Well, we want to control what crosses the border in an orderly fashion. It's not that you want to stop it. It's that you want to control it and you want to regulate it. In other words, we need the government to regulate the things that it should be regulating and stop regulating the things that it shouldn't be. So, and in order to have trade agreements and in order to control terrorism, and in order to, look after the security of this country, you have to control the border. I mean, it's just common sense. That's the reason Trump is winning. It's common sense.
Okay, we're just hearing, actually, the AP, Associated Press, are calling Pennsylvania now for Trump as well. We still don't have official results there. But, I mean, do you feel, as a Trump supporter and someone who's followed him through this election, that you can really trust him to be president of the United States, bearing in mind, of course, the lack of experience he has?
Oh, absolutely. I've met Trump several times. I just talked to him in New Jersey the other day. I feel like we can trust him more than career politicians, and that's the reason he won. He's not a career politician, and he's been brutally honest and blunt about his message. He actually had a real defined, real clear message. They kept saying that he didn't have one in the media, but that's not true. He's had tons and tons of details of exactly what he's going to do, whereas with Hillary, I thought there was no message. I mean, what was her message? I never understood it.
OK, Sean M. McCutcheon is the Trump delegate from Alabama. Thanks very much for joining us. Just to bring you up to date then with that, not a result at this stage, but we've been hearing some figures from Pennsylvania. It was being called, as it were, by the Associated Press. Hopefully we can bring those figures up for you, show you Pennsylvania. Here they come. 20 electoral votes at stake there, and it is being called at the moment by Donald Trump, but still not an official result. Of course, we'll continue to bring you the results as they come in. We're still waiting to hear from 7 states, in fact. Now, we're going to talk a bit more about international relations with our guests here on set, and we're also going to talk about China and how the result of the election could be seen there. We're going to cross to Brian Kubinski. He joins us from Beijing. A Trump presidency, how on earth is that going to be viewed there?
Well, a mixed bag. In some ways, Trump obviously is not as harsh or as tough on China as Clinton was known to be. So in that sense, the Chinese won't have to worry about as much pressure from him. On the other hand, for the economic issues, with Trump's talk of a trade war and tariffs, that could be a bit of a problem. On the other hand, the Chinese government is pretty familiar with the U.S. election process at this point, and they take all this kind of China bashing that you see during elections as mere campaign rhetoric, U.S. politics sort of thing. And they think that candidates, regardless of who they are, even Donald Trump, will get down to business after they become president. So he has some advantages over Clinton. He may not be as stable as her, but either way, they think it might, there's a feeling among some that it's going to be about the same either way.
And I mean, just his whole phrase, putting America first, I mean, particularly economically, that's going to be pretty difficult for the Chinese to swallow, isn't it?
It certainly could be. It depends on what Trump does, because it's really, who really knows. But certainly if he tries to push hard on this trade and tariffs and whatnot, that will be difficult. I don't think we'd see a trade war necessarily, even if he instigated that. I doubt China would be interested in going back at it with that. But that will be difficult. One area they won't have to worry about difficulties is regional security. For example, tensions in the South China Sea, tensions with North Korea. I don't think these are things that the very isolationist Donald Trump is very concerned about. So they will feel pressure from Trump on economics, but in terms of pretty much anything else, they'll be kind of off the hook compared to Clinton.
Brian Kubinski joining us there from Beijing. Thanks very much. Frederick Douzet, I know you want to make a comment about that. It's going to be very difficult, isn't it, this relationship between different countries, particularly China and the US.
It remains to be seen. I mean, first, I think we need to say that we have absolutely no idea who Donald Trump is going to pick for his team and who's going to be running foreign policy. So it's right now very difficult to know. And also, I think the perceptions are quite mixed in China about Trump, and not that unfavorable. He's very respected as a businessman. So even though they might worry about trade wars, they do respect that. And Hillary Clinton is not that well perceived. I mean, she's made a lot of declarations about human rights and pushing for more human rights. And she was in charge of the pivot to Asia policy in the State Department, which was very much perceived by the Chinese as trying to contain the country. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know how strained our relationship will be.
David?
Well, I think we have to look also at some of the things that Trump has said during his campaign about Asia. One of the things he said is that Japan and South Korea, for instance, have to take more of the burden of their own defense on themselves, and there's no reason that they should be concerned, they should be welcomed under our nuclear umbrella, which would open, it would seem, the way for Japan and South Korea to develop their own nuclear arsenal. This is not something that would go down very well in Beijing, I suspect. At the same time, that could inflame, in turn, North Korea. We could suddenly see a nuclear arms race in Asia that is quite frightening and appalling. No one really knows what direction that could go in. At the same time, a laissez-faire attitude like that could certainly allow China a fairly free reign in the South China Sea to extend its mandate further out into contested waters in Asia, and this would certainly impact a lot of the Southeast Asian countries. The results, the impact of some of his comments alone are conceivably, now that he's the president of the United States, really have to be taken very seriously, and I would think there'd be a great deal of concern across that part of the world.
Got Doug Herbert, and you just need to talk to Doug very quickly because he's joining us on the line from Washington. Doug, we were just talking about foreign policy there and talking about the enormous concern, really, potentially, amongst a whole series of nations around the world now, if there is Donald Trump in the White House there.
sorry, Stuart, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. You're talking to me, I assume.
Yes, I am. Sorry. We were talking about world politics,
Very good,
really.
yeah,
We were just talking about China and Iran and what the potential could be for a Donald Trump presidency.
There are so many unknown unknowns right now. You know, the reality of what's potentially shaping up right now tonight with Donald Trump headed to the White House, just the ramifications on the domestic front or something, and on the political landscape here, and for this, everything really in America itself. The foreign implications, the foreign policy implications are really going to set in only afterwards. We've heard so much rhetoric in this campaign, you know, whether it's about NATO, you know, NATO members having to sort of basically pay to have America by their side, defending them. We've had a lot of rhetoric, you know, sort of an isolationist vein, sort of retreating from the world in many respects. We've had a lot of statements basically showing a lot of ignorance by Donald Trump about nuclear weapons. We've had him, you know, putting the Iran deal into question, calling it, you know, one of the worst deals ever negotiated. So like I said, you know, how much of this, you know, when he said it, there was sort of, you know, oh, it's a lot of rhetoric, and a lot of people didn't actually think perhaps that Donald Trump, the prospect of him becoming president, would ever actually make people have to sit down and give some hard thought to the implications of some of these policy statements. But now that rhetoric could potentially turn into now the hard policy that a Secretary of State in a Donald Trump cabinet now has to actually deal with on the ground with foreign leaders. And obviously it also brings up the entire, you know, issue of Vladimir Putin, you know, the Russia's influence, if any, within this campaign. Donald Trump, you know, on several occasions saying, you know, I like him, he likes me. It was talk, you know, that really perplexed a lot of people and made them raise some very, very serious questions about how this would affect, you know, U.S. policy towards Russia, vice versa, at a time when, you know, under the Obama administration, there's been a real attempt to put some distance between the U.S. and Russia and to really show Vladimir Putin, in many respects, that he can't just, you know, invade other countries, take other territories back, such as Crimea, be aggressive in eastern Ukraine, make sort of encroaching moves on Eastern Europe and those NATO countries we were talking about, especially the Baltic states. So like I said, you know, it's almost like you could think out loud, and each issue that pops up raises another issue, and it's almost like tomorrow, the day after that is when you're really going to start thinking about these things. Right now, I think people are just going to have to start to grapple with the issues here on the domestic front and what it really means in the here and now, in the immediate, for you know, the political rebuilding in America going ahead.
OK, we'll talk about Putin with our guests here on set in just a moment. Thanks very much, Doug, for the moment. But if you are just tuning in, just to update you with the latest situation, we can show you the map across the US of which states so far have gone to which candidate. But it's pretty much certain, inching ever closer, if you like, to Donald Trump being elected president of the US. You can see now just a few states, the ones in white there, still to declare. But Donald Trump sweeping further across the board and winning some of those key states as well that, of course, we've all had our eyes incredibly closely on over the last few hours and indeed days and weeks here on France 24. It's good to have you with us for today's programme. We were just mentioning there, or Doug brought it up really, Vladimir Putin and the relationship, if you like, between the US and Russia. I mean, it's going to be one of those fascinating things to look at and watch as the days unfold, isn't it?
It is, and it's going to be interesting to see how much Putin would feel now unleashed to take some adventures that he probably would feel that Donald Trump would be reluctant to call him on. and that was a great concern, as I think I've mentioned, on my 2.5-week trip through the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The leaders that I spoke with there were petrified about a Donald Trump presidency because of the license it could give Putin for adventures. But not only in that part of the world, in the Middle East, in Syria, certainly, he would have his hands free. Basically, Putin would see himself as unleashed to do whatever he thought was right for Russia, simply because he did not have a president of the United States who was prepared to call him on it.
Worried about that, Frederick?
Yeah, I think it's going to have a huge impact on the transatlantic relationship as well, because clearly there are a number of countries in Europe that are seriously worried about what Russia could do and feel threatened and really rely on NATO to support them and to defend them. So now we're in the situation where not only does he say that he likes Putin and Putin likes him, but he's also saying that NATO countries should basically take care of themselves, and that if it doesn't work, then they might just pull out of the alliance. So how much of that is campaign talk and how much of that is actually serious? Because at the same time, he says his top priority is to fight terrorism. So how do you do that without strong allies? That's going to be very problematic, I think.
I'm really anxious to see what that secret plan he is, by the way, for getting rid of ISIS. That's really
destruction.
He's meant to sort it out within a few weeks, isn't he?
Presumably.
I mean, Philip, just going back on that again, I mean, he did make so many promises, didn't he? And Russia really is going to be one of those areas that everyone's going to be watching now, and that relationship, key relationship really, between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. I mean, at least some might say, of course, that the relationship between Obama and Putin had broken down. So at least maybe there's a chance for some hope there that they might be able to talk to each other at least.
Well, I think the Obama-Putin relationship broke down principally over the Putin's activities in former Soviet states, and also over the war in Syria. And there was no prospect of that improving. And I don't think there would have been much prospect of that improving if Hillary Clinton were to get into the White House. And probably Hillary Clinton might have even been more aggressive towards Vladimir Putin. So now we're in this completely opposite scenario where we've got the man who looks destined to become the next president of the United States, who even wants to become a buddy of Vladimir Putin. So how is that going to affect the war in Syria? How is that going to affect what's going on in Iraq? And as you quite rightly say, what's this great plan to get rid of ISIS? We don't know anything about it. It's all rhetoric. It's all chat to win support. But I don't think there's any easier way of getting rid of ISIS than the way that the Allied forces are in the process of doing right now in Mosul and Raqqa. But it's not something, it's the way that Donald Trump operates is to come up with simple solutions to very complex situations. And this is just a prime example of that. Right, we'll get rid of ISIS, there's no problem, we're going to make America safe again. Well, how are you going to do it? Well, we'll worry about that when we're elected. And I think now that if he is going to be elected, it's going to be very difficult to come up with a plan that's going to make it easy.
And do you think voters will then realise and recognise perhaps that it was all rhetoric, or...?
Do you think the problem is that we've compared this several times today about the Brexit vote in the UK, and a lot of people who voted in favour of Brexit saw it as a short-term way of getting rid of immigration into the United Kingdom, which they perceive as bad for the country because they say these immigrants take jobs, especially migrants from Eastern Europe and also from Syria and Iraq. But that's not the solution. They don't really know anything about the EU. It's seen as an obscure body that just costs a lot of money, doesn't serve any purpose. And I think in the United States, the war in Syria, the nuclear deal with Iran, the relationship with Vladimir Putin is far from the concerns of the average man or woman in the street. What they want is someone who's going to make America great again, give them back jobs, give them back hope, and make sure they've got enough to survive on and give their children a bright future. The problem is, I don't think Donald Trump's the right man to be able to do that. And I think all the policies, all the promises that he's been making are going to quickly backfire on him because he won't be able to come up with the goods. But then it will be too late.
And Frederick, I mean, I think we're going to lose you very shortly, so let's leave one of the last words to you. I mean, as Philip was saying there, that Make America Great slogan really has been that thing that's carried him through the election, hasn't it?
Yeah, just to reflect on what you were saying, we need to remember that Donald Trump has walked back from some of the things he's said before. I mean, the total ban on Muslims is finally said, well, that would be unconstitutional, or deportation of illegal undocumented immigrants. Then he started saying, well, maybe we should find a path, and it was not going to be that simple. So probably once he's faced with the complexities of foreign policy, he's probably going to walk back from some of the statements he's made. But Make America Great Again, I think that argument has really been speaking to the people who are either in fear or in a situation of displacement, and they've been losing their jobs. They have not benefited that well from the recovery of the economy. They see the world changing around them, but they don't really understand the implications, and they worry about their own status, and they fear losing their own status. So it's a mix of all of that, and then premiums for Obamacare have been rising, and that also has been a burden in some of the rural states. So I think the combination of all of that has given a pretty negative image to these voters who feel that America is losing status. And the other aspect that I think is very, very important is not only the country is increasingly polarized, but people increasingly live in different reality bubbles. The media market is heavily fragmented. On top of that, you have social media, which are now the first point of entry for people to get their news more and more. So they tend to get their news from their friends, from what their friends like. They tend to have algorithms feeding them with the content that is going to reinforce whatever their beliefs are. And you can tell that the candidates did not agree on the ideas on how to solve the problems of the country, but they didn't even agree on basic facts about what these problems were. So I think that's very worrying.
OK, Frederick, thank you very much. Frederick's going to leave us at that point, so thanks very much for coming in, talking to us. Professor from the Institut Français French Institute, which is also American civilization expert at Paris 8 and a member of the Institut Les Amériques. Thanks very much for being with us. David's going to be back with us a little bit later on during the day, and Philip will be back with us in just a few moments because he's not going anywhere. But in the meantime, you may have noticed that somebody else has slid onto the set. Diptyque Laurent is also joining me here to look at how the election's being reported on, commented on and followed on the internet as well, Diptyque, and also in the newspapers.
That's right. Let's start with the Washington Post. They say Trump seizes clear advantage, of course, with wins in Florida and other battleground states, including Ohio, which traditionally actually picks the president. The Huffington Post says on its homepage, Fright Night, close, 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 really underpinning just how down the wire these elections are getting. And the New York Times says Trump is on the verge of a stunning upset, while Breitbart on the right-wing media calls him Mr. Brexit, wondering indeed if he also will go down the road of that unexpected Brexit vote. And just the Drudge Report, which is also a right-wing media, tends to be pro-Trump. They've got this sort of rolling ticker of headlines. Trump wins in historic uprising. Republicans keep House. Trump wins Florida, Iowa, and all the states that he's been winning. So just a few reactions from Twitter. This voter, a Trump supporter, says, we did it. Media refuses to report that Trump wins, even though they know Pennsylvania is a lock and likely Michigan also. So in Trump's camp, we're seeing that they're actually calling a victory, even though the official result has not come out yet. And just a few more tweets. This person also making reference once more to the Brexit, the unexpected nature of the Brexit. And this user saying, if Trump wins tonight, he will have defeated Hillary Clinton, the Democrat Party, the Republican establishment, and the media. Quite a string of victories, isn't it? And one of the bigger losses for the Democrats, of course, that swing state, Diptyque of Florida. That's right. That was one of the most important states that the Democrats lost. And the Washington Post actually reports that this defeat has essentially wiped out the Democrats in the South. Here you see a map of the control of state legislative action. And there's not a single blue state in the southern states of America. The last southern state was Kentucky, which was actually Democrat for almost a century. It, too, has become Republican now. And what have you been seeing about the impact of these elections on the rest of the world as well? Well, let's start with Ann Coulter, who's sort of a conservative shock jock. She's obviously making reference to the number of celebrities who threatened to move to Canada, saying she's accepting volunteers to drive Lena Dunham, Barbara Streisand, Bryan Cranston over the border. She thinks it's to Mexico. Some of them have obviously said Canada. And interestingly enough, the Canadian immigration website crashed on election night. And this is a website. It's back up now, but for a while, people could not access it. I'm imagining that was a lot of Americans frantically trying to access the immigration rules of Canada.
And a lot of anxiety as well over just the sheer closeness of these results, Dipti.
That's right. Election anxiety, you might say. That's what Fortune is saying. In fact, it's even BuzzFeed was saying before, people are freaking out. They're flipping out over how close these election results are. Just a few tweets here. Mr. Bean making his appearance here, waiting for the U.S. election results. You see him peering out of the door there, while this user... This is 538. That's right, and a few other sort of reactions on Twitter and Facebook.
Okay, and you've been following that, of course, very, very closely for us. That's Diptyka Lauren looking at the papers and also what's appearing on the internet, on the Twitter sphere, if you like, to follow this election for you. We're just hearing as well that Maine is now being called for Donald Trump as well. Don't have the exact results, but we're just hearing that just coming into us here at France 24. Of course, we'll continue to follow events. We're also hearing Clinton's campaign chairman is due to speak very shortly at Clinton's campaign headquarters. That's just coming into us as well. I was also just seeing some comments coming in from the French Foreign Minister, Jean-Marc Ayrault. He has said that he sees France still working very, very closely with the US, but he does say in a bit of a sided comment, Trump's personality asks questions, is the comment that the French Foreign Minister Jean-Marc Ayrault has made just a few moments ago here in France. It's good to have you with us here on France 24. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock in the morning, in fact, here in Paris, which is 2 a.m. on the east coast of the US. You're watching a very special programme on France 24 and on Radio France International as well. They're going to leave us just for a few moments to bring you the latest news on the radio. They'll be back with us very shortly. If you're just joining us, though, hello, good to have you with us. This is a special election programme here on France 24. I'm Stuart Norval. Good to have you with us for today's programme. Today, then, the day that Donald Trump, it appears, not quite, but he's pretty much on his way now to being elected as the next president of the United States. The man born in 1946 rose to be a businessman and television producer, television presenter as well, chairman and president, of course, of the Trump Organization, the owner of massive real estate ventures and a series of other business interests, and all that before his totally unexpected rise as a politician, emerging after a bitter battle within his own party for the Republican nomination. He has now, after a second bitter battle, probably been elected as the US president. Let's bring you once again the map. There you go. There you can see it. The states in white there still to be declared. The others, that vast swathe of red Republican seats, the southwest of the US, also reaching up into the north there as well. And just those states on the east and west really marked in Democrat blue. Those key states as well as Ohio and Florida that we were following earlier, which did fall to Trump. We're still waiting just for a few results there. We'll bring them to you as we get them, of course, here on France 24. And we can also show you the total number of electoral votes. There you go, that's as it stands at the moment. Hillary Clinton on 218 and Donald Trump on 265. So as you can tell there, far higher red bar there, if you like, than was expected by the pollsters this time yesterday. Well, let's now just have a listen to a few Donald Trump supporters. Let's hear what they've had to say.
It's close. I knew it would